Assalamu alaikum. I invite you for a moment to join me in a silent prayer for those lives which were lost in Texas in the school shooting this morning. So for a moment, I ask you to lift whatever strength you have in your heart, whatever power you have in your soul, with the prayer that God would rain upon all of the lives that were lost and all of the hearts that were broken, the peace that only God can bring. Please join me in silent prayer for a moment. Thank you. As we gather here today, let us recognize all that has been accomplished by those who sit before us. Through the hard work, through the great sacrifice that they have shown and given unto this work. We also come to celebrate the families and friends who allowed them to be here through their love and encouragement. So I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege, and I'm going to ask if any of you ever had to watch the kids clean the house or do any of the other kind of things that people do who live together that love each other when papers have to get done. And when exams have to be studied for, I'm going to ask you to stand so that we might applaud you. Because we know that it is true, behind every graduate, there is a great pool of love that has allowed you to be here. So we thank each and every one of you. As well, we celebrate a new iteration of the leaders for the next. We behold a new generation of witnesses to the enduring truth that in God's world, we all matter. Not just some of us, but we all matter. With your family, friends, and co-conspirators. And I say co-conspirators because if you do not have plans to change this broken world, then you really are not a CTS person, right? I mean, because that's just kind of what we do, right? So your co-conspirators, I offer a hearty congratulations as we celebrate you and all that you have done to bring you to this place. I stand today to do a bit more, though. In the midst of this celebration of your triumph, I want to give voice to a call to responsibility. And it's a call to responsibility which I will offer you as a challenge in 3 parts. The first is to recognize and hold on to the truth that it was God who called you to CTS in the first place. That it wasn't a funky ad that you saw online, that it wasn't one of our wonderful people in admissions, because I mean, they did good work getting you here, but it was God that called you here. Our differing traditions have ways of evoking such calls, but have no doubt in your heart whatsoever that in whatever idiom it was that God's voice spoke to you, God called you to this place. God called you to this people. This was a calling which came in the multivocality which is peculiar to the divine locution. A multivocality which is heard in speech, seen in dreams, and in the faces of all who bear flesh, heard in the whispers of the wind, in the laughter of children, and in the myriad of sounds whose cacophonies of living voice give witness to the power of God. Now, this calling was not just to this place that we all hold dear. While it might well be enough to some to say that being shaped by this place that we call CTS is gift enough, it might be well said that it's enough for you to have been here to be able to give thanks. I challenge you not to find the final significance there. For as much as God called you to this place, these people, because of our unique charisms, this was also a calling for you to become someone and something in particular. Each of you are here today because God has used CTS in the shaping of your sacred vocation. Because wherever you go, you have a sacred vocation. So the first challenge that I offer you is then to never let go of that truth, that you stand here today because you hearkened to God's calling, and that God has something for you to do in this world, and you should never doubt that. So this first challenge is then, once again, to never let go of that truth. In the succeeding years, it will be easy enough to believe that it was simply a matter of practicality. Well, you all had an online degree. It'll be simple enough to reduce it to, well, you were close to where I live. It will be simple enough to reduce it to, well, you were able to give me some scholarship funds. Resist the temptation to reduce your calling. And know that God brought you to this place, to Chicago Theological Seminary, for a reason, to give you something. Resist this siren call of time and cling to the certainty that if God brought you to this place, God means you to take something from this place. Our time, the times in which we live, the times in which we exist both as a nation, as a world, is a time that is in need of redeemers of the public square. This age needs people who, by dint of person, by peculiarity of calling, and by depth of their passionate love of God and their neighbor, pour themselves out in big ways and small, in places east and west, north and south, in the cosmopolis and in the simple place, in temple, the mosque, and the sanctuary. They pour themselves out so that others might find succor and they might find hope. Our time, this time in our public life, needs redeemers because the singular space in which we experience and express our humanity, the greatest gift of God to us, that space is under assault and the ramparts may yet fail. It falls the sacred duty of us all, not simply our graduates, but of us all. But to some in particular, the task of being redeemers of the public square is a part of their calling. The sacredness of the public square is rooted in the reality that it is the place that we actually become human. We have no way of experiencing our humanity apart from being in the public square. Where else do we get the language to talk about the fathomless depths of longing, hope, and despair that makes human existence? Where else do we find the unique sounds which, when uttered by our vocality, become our name? Where do we learn what our name means? not only to others, but to ourselves. Where else do we find spaces in which custom creates structures for us to express that most human of impulses, empathy? Where else, if not the public square? We often think of those times alone when we imagine ourselves with God. Who gave us a name for God but the people in our public square? Now, one of the ways that you can know how important the public square is that whenever evil decides that its time has come again, the first place that it assaults is the public square, by making some people feel as if they own it in a way that others do not, by making it a space in which people are pushed into the shadows and into the margins, making it a space in which our unique humanity becomes a curse and not a gift from God. So if you are not convinced by what I say about the public square from the positive side, then clearly you should understand that from the negative side, that if that's the first place that evil attacks, then it must be important to God. Our time needs redeemers because this sacred space, our public square, has become awash in xenophobia, bigotry, and hatred. Our place to be human is today one in which venality seems to have carried the day. From the most powerful, referring to our neighbors as animals. Now, I'm not going to say immigrants, because whether someone is an immigrant or whether someone is someone who forgot that they were once immigrants, that they are all our neighbors. So when someone calls our neighbors animals, our public square is awash in venality. To the meanest among us who exercise their resentment at having to share space with Black people by calling the police to disrupt the quotidian exercise of their humanity. I mean, you know, you've seen the list floating around, right? You can't go to Starbucks. You can't go to the park to barbecue. You can't go to the store to try to return a piece of merchandise. You can't go to a restaurant, and I mean, really, if you care about your cholesterol, you don't need to be in Waffle House, but even so, you can't go to Waffle House. And the list just grows and grows and grows. And it's not just a list that attaches itself to Black people, but to brown people of all sorts. Is one of the things I note all the time and everywhere that I can, is that if you look at our immigration policy and enforcement, you find virtually none of it happening in communities that have Eastern European immigrants. But if you go to Pilsen or other communities where our neighbors are of a brown hue and speak in the idiom of Spanish, you find ICE agents everywhere you look. To the rending of families by the authorities. All of these give witness to what is happening to our public square. We need redeemers because violence seems to have become the lingua franca of this age, giving voice to the worst in us and never calling forth the best, leaving in its wake shattered lives connected to the bodies that are strewn in nightclubs, in church basements, in mosques, in schools, and across the floor of Waffle House. Our times are in need of redeemers. People who will make the public space, the public square, a space that is once again safe for us all. Redeemers whose work will be to make room for those being pushed into the shadows, make space for those being forced back into the closet, hold a seat for those who are denied entry. These days and times need people who will forcefully stand as witnesses to the truth that in God's world, the public square has room for us all, each and every one of us. In a word, these times need CTS kind of people. These times need you. My second challenge then is for you to step boldly into this work which God has called us with the certainty that God will sustain you. So wherever it is that God calls you to do your work, your ministry, your calling, or your vocation, you are doing just a little bit of what is necessary to save the space in which we all find our humanity. The final charge I give you today is to have courage. Because, you know, this is hard work that I am challenging you to be a part of. It's very easy to take your degree and go somewhere and hide in a job. It's very easy to take your degree and go somewhere and hide in a pastorate. It's very easy to take your degree and go hide in a chaplaincy because there's always a beeper that's beeping with your name. It's very easy for you to take your degree and go and hide in doing some sort of public service that you become a bureaucrat. It is so easy to take your degree and hide. I challenge you to find courage. I challenge you to take that which has been given to you at CTS so that not only might you find courage, but you might help others find their courage. And you might help them find their courage so that as we make of this space a place in which we all have place, that we do so in a way that we build a better public square than the one that we feel we have lost. So I'm not asking you to simply restore something. I'm asking you to build something anew. I'm asking you to take what you've learned in your Bible class, what you've learned in your commitment class, what you've learned in your theology classes, what you've learned in your ethics classes, but most importantly, what you have learned from one another, to find the courage to help others find their courage. The kind of courage which bears within it the certainty that no matter how powerful the forces arrayed against us on earth, that there is no power on earth that is strong enough to hold back the dawn. I charge you today to fully claim your place in this struggle, to redeem the public square, our square, to claim that place with all the strength that faith in God and one another bestows upon you. I realize that this is not an easy task, but I also know that you got this. I'm going to take a page out of my pastor's book here. I want you to look at your neighbor. I want you to look at your neighbor. All of you, I want you to look at your neighbor, and I want you to say, we got this. Let's say that again, we got this. Your presence here today is the testimony that God has given you everything that you need in this sacred calling. God has given this to you in one another, in this sacred community, most importantly, in those who have stood by you when you faltered, who have strengthened you when your heart was weary, and who have helped you to be able to see beyond the challenge of the moment. God has given you what you need to help a world which needs you so badly. In your own way and in your own space, near and far, the call and cry of a world broken and bruised, to redeem the public square so that there might be room for us all. God has inscribed that upon your hearts. I charge you today to hearken unto that with all of the passion of that verse of old. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer my God. Be jubilant, my feet. God bless you.